Hey friends, welcome back to the summer series on Buddha and the Slut. You might hear I have a bit of a cold, but that's okay. Nothing that some spicy kimchi noodles can't handle in this gloomy Edinburgh climb. Now, horrors of climate change aside, because it was crazy 40 degrees Celsius in Berlin just last week, and now it's chilly and cold and moldy and gross, I'm hoping the current climes and times are treating you right and blessing you all with warm waves of creative inspiration, spiritual elation, and just maybe a little romantic persuasion. But no naughty tales this time, children. In fact, today we go digging for some dirt of the creative kind. Rummage around the mess of weeds and roots to hopefully uncover another key moment in this old rogue's storytelling journey, because that's where the real treasures are buried. We just gotta be brave enough to roll the dice, don our robes, and embrace the adventure. Of course, I'm talking about Dungeons and Dragons. D&D Advanced! And how I kinda discovered a pretty major piece of my puzzle, a facet of my true calling, if you will, through playing this weird and wondrous and unabashedly geeky role-playing game. My first taste of D&D was harmless enough. Pretty typical, actually, for a kid in the 80s suburbia of Canada. Now, this was before most folks, at least in a small town like mine, shied away from adult supervision for their preteens, because we didn't have PlayStations and smartphones and Netflix as our nannies. Probably a good thing, depending upon the, quote, babysitter, unquote. But I was lucky, because my guy was a frizzy afro-sporting, thick glasses-wearing, bad skin-having, brace-face-owning, Boy Scout trooping, Adam's apple-a-poppin', whiter-than-white nerd Lord Stephen. And he was nicer to me than most in that let's just microwave some hot dogs and watch crappy movies kind of way. I remember him asking if I'd read The Hobbit yet, which I had. The Lord of the Rings? Not yet, but I really liked the animated movie. Cue the eye-rolling and the smug nerd sigh. But you dig fantasy, right? Swords and sorcery, all that stuff? Of course. What self-respecting kid with a 10-speed bike and shelves full of comics and action figures didn't like that? Cool. I'm going to teach you how to play a game, just the basics for now, and if you really get into it, I think it's going to blow your mind. But first, do you have some dice? Did I have dice? Did I have dice? Bitch, please, I've been playing Yahtzee and rolling large straight since I was 4. Do I have dice? Oh yeah, sure. But only 6-sided dice, right? And I had that look that dogs get when you tell them to do your taxes. Fine, he said. We'll just make characters today. We can start the campaign with my dice next time. For the uninitiated, this is the classic entry point to the world of Dungeons and Dragons, or any old-school role-playing game. Character creation. You roll 3 normal dice and assign scores to various attributes like strength, intelligence, etc. And from those totals, numbers between 3 and 18, you then figure out the kind of character that makes the most sense, based on the perceived strengths and weaknesses of the rolls that you made. This is where the creative freedom and your imagination really start to blossom in the game. Because it all comes down to your choices at that point. Are you going to be your run-of-the-mill human, a sprightly elf, a lumbering orc, a hairy-footed halfling, i.e. hobbit, bearded dwarf captain? And these are just some of the races you can pick from, of either sex, each with inherent advantages and flaws. And then there's your alignment. How is your character going to interact with the world? Are they good or evil, lawful or chaotic, neutral, indifferent? Devoted to a flag, a king, a god, or just flagons of wine and mountains of gold? But I think more important than any of these is your class. Not social class like the Indian caste system or Downton Abbey shit. I'm talking about your character class. What are you going to be once the adventure starts? What's your job in the world, your purpose? This is where you take your personal whims and preferences and factor in those dice rolls you did. Got a high score on strength? Then some kind of fighter is a good choice and you'll be breaking down doors and bashing goblin heads. High intelligence? You could be the magic user, sorcerer, Gandalf the Grey, floppy-hatted wizardy type. Decent dexterity? Then thief could be your calling, as those nimble fingers are perfect for picking locks and pockets. And there are tons more, but I think you get the point. It's a lot of preamble, I know, but the reason I'm telling it this way is because my geek babysitter had the same kind of pitch to me on how the whole D&D thing worked, how to approach it, how to prepare, so by the time I had a basic character rolled and figured out their race, class, alignment, what armor they had, spellbook, beard or no beard, horse or no horse, and whether they used the right or left hand to wipe after dropping a brown troll in the woods, well, that's when my parents got home. Steven got paid. Till next time, buddy. But there never was a next time with Steven. He got a real job, and I guess dating actual girls and getting actual hand jobs at the Pefferlaw Drive-In was infinitely more important than showing a buck-toothed Gomer how to do imaginary things, like saving throws versus poison or the best time to cast a fireball. Hint, not in a closed 10 by 10 stone room if you're hoping never to die from mystical third-degree burns. Be that as it may, the burning may have waned, but it did not die. Not for me, for it wasn't long after this that my dear cousin, yeah, Tobias Tinker, the one from episode 4 of this show and the creator of the Buddha and the Slut soundtrack, came all the way up from Victoria Square to Sutton, West Ontario for our annual weekend sleepover. Alas, it was a rainy weekend. A rainy weekend years before we had video games and VHS tapes to soothe the indoor blues. We literally had nothing to do. That is, until he dumped a small velvet bag of brightly colored 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, and 20-sided plastic polyhedrons on the dining room table and asked me, "Have you heard of D&D?" Those next 2 days were an imagination-stirring, heart-gripping, and mind-nuking blur. Tobias was more than happy to play the role of DM for me, that's Dungeon Master, for the uninitiated like I was. Without delay, he deftly guided me through the process of creating a character, explaining the basic rules, and diving straight into the game world. Now, since I was going to be playing a solo campaign, and since he knew my not-so-secret longing to swing big swords and kick no small amount of magic ass, I embarked on my quest to slay the evil red dragon atop a mountain of treasure as Garanthrax, the not-yet-legendary chaotic good half-elf fighter magic user Esquire. And yeah, young boys of power fantasies and this bumbling weepy nerd now had steel-bending 17 strength and super genius 18 intelligence. Sure, I wasn't so wise, and my overall health and healing factor, constitution, was average at best. But my 16 charisma smoothly swayed the nervous townsfolk to my worthy cause. Man, that weekend. That glorious weekend. We started playing before noon and only stopped around 7 to crush a bag of dill pickle chips and 2 homemade pizzas. Thanks, Ma. The blinds were drawn, candles were soon lit. There was a hush in the room as the Dungeon Master described everything. The mythic, war-torn landscapes, the ominous clouds rumbling overhead, the battle-scarred rogues who joined my cause in search of platinum and infamy, the dark cracks in the mountainside beckoning the brave and foolish deeper underground. Piles of bleached bones in that first hallway. Bones of man and elf and dwarf who had tried and failed in their quest. And the enemies I fought that day. Hearing their inhuman voices, tensing with each footstep, trembling in their hulking shadows, rolling for initiative to see who would strike first. Screams and shields and the hellish stink of goblin and orc and ogre breath on my face as I rushed to launch a volley of magic missiles before being slashed or stabbed or sleep-spelled into nothingness. I remember the first time that I died. I was just a few levels down in the mountain, a collapsing wall or a spiked pit or some booby-trapped door, and I was sad. Palpably sad. But my DM said the gods were pleased with my efforts. He said I had more to do. Whisked me back to the realm of the living with a gasp and a shriek. I remember wondering aloud what I had seen on the other side. But Tobias would only say, "We don't talk about that. We don't ever talk about that." More battles came, more monsters, Magic potions and +3 swords and scrolls with powerful spells. I was on the verge of snaring some great treasure in a vast chamber with an underground river running through it if I could only figure out a way to cross. But that's when Mom came out and told us, in no uncertain terms, go to bed. I didn't know what the big deal was till I saw the clock. 2 a.m. Where had the time gone? Where had we gone for all those hours? A restless sleep, weird dreams, orange juice and a bowl of Cheerios and straight back to the quest. We neared the big battle just before lunch, entered the dragon's cave and stood in awe at the mound of treasure it crouched upon. We called a false truce with it, flattered the beast and sang songs to it while sneaking closer and closer until we could snatch a glowing sword and staff from the treasure pile. Sneak attack, roll 20s, lightning bolt! Kicked the shit out of that guy, finishing the campaign just before my cousin had to go home. Man, I was hooked. Hooked on this secret world that had been opened to me, this heroine of imagination. But I would have to be patient. It took a few more years for my little town to catch up, for me to walk into the high school cafeteria in grade 9 and suddenly hear that familiar clatter of strange dice being rolled, of stats being furiously scribbled, of magic swords being drawn and terrible foes being slain, of epic stories being told. Stories you can play. Roll call. Jim Johansson, Scott Johnson, Ed Grassi, Jim Cluffley, and Marty fucking Short. We weren't all friends, not by a long shot, but we were brothers in arms for years, every day at lunch, and some weekends too. Fuck the jocks and the skids and the bubblegum bitch brigade. We were legends, and sure, preteen male power fantasies gave way to actual teen ones. Some of us kept kill counts, the gorier the better. Some rolled a 20-sided die to seduce a maiden or score a magic dick enhancement. We scoured villages and started wars and summoned demons and trekked to the astral planes to challenge the gods themselves. And when the D&D satanic panic in the mid-80s struck, shit, we attended a concerned parents meeting in force at the little town hall where they held those religious indoctrination nights once a month for local kids that loosely masqueraded as dances. Oh yeah, we spoke up and waved our DM guides and player handbooks and Tomb of Horrors modules in their faces and bragged that our group had 4 honor roll kids, a track and field star, and at least 2 entrepreneurs before it was technically legal. They were speechless. That night, hearts were opened and minds were blown. And not just minds, my friends, because 2 hours later, I was getting my first beej outside from a pious young thing who dug the passion in my voice and the stonewashed denim on my ass. Dungeons and Dragons makes men. Well, not really, but it sure can teach you about yourself. All those choices to make. Kind or cruel or complete indifference. Man, woman, non-binary before it was cool. Religious, agnostic, atheist. The path of brute force, superior intellect, or deceit and trickery. Grand illusions versus the wisdom that comes with faith. Like I said in the beginning, I think it all boils down to class. Who are you going to be? Thieves and assassins, they never really spoke to me. I just wasn't the steal and stab type. And bards, the ones who sing their stories and spells into being, you'd think that would be me, but my friends, the guys, the cool kids, called them a joke. Losers. As a sorcerer, well, I played and I got addicted. Obsessed with better magic and more spells, more power. It always cost me in the end. And fighters? Well, it seems to be the classic boy thing, right? I played as fighters and knights and even a paladin a few times, but never did so well. I played with too much bravado, or not enough. Tried too hard or thought myself into a corner. I remember one of the guys at our table, he said it best to me back then. It was after some punk kids slapped me down for my smart mouth in the cafeteria when I tried to defend myself or some girl or something with my words. I hit the ground really badly. It was an awkward wailing and flailing, and in the back of my head, it just didn't make any sense. On paper, I was twice his size, and I was 10 times smarter. It was in the aftermath of that, wiping the tears away and wearing that crimson handprint on my face like the scar from a dragon's claw bite. That's when the whole table laughed, and Marty fucking Short said, "You're hilarious. You're like a wizard with 18 strength. Face it, you'll never know how to fucking use it." And that stuck with me. It went in deep. Something changed then as I pondered his words, the whole concept of them, the truth in it, what it meant to be smart, what it meant to be strong, and what it meant to be me. I took a break for a while from D&D, joined the volleyball team, did a musical, got a summer job at the arcade, kissed a girl or two by the lake. And when I came back to school that fall, I came back one more time to play too. "What you gonna be this time, Burgess?" I rolled my dice and tallied the scores. Above average overall, but with two standouts, a 17 and an 18. I put the first on strength and the second on wisdom, the key trait of a cleric. "You're gonna play a cleric, man? Seriously?" "Yeah. He's a chaotic good cleric, so he doesn't fight for a flag, but will for a worthy cause, like his friends. He's not the bravest, so instead of leading the charge or bringing the firepower, he's there for support. And when you're hurt, when your back's against the wall and you're getting ready to meet your maker, that's when he'll strike the foes down with his hammer and heal all of you, even if it's the last thing he does. For the record, he's a half-elf. His name is Garanthrax. He's died in battle before, but the gods always brought him back. Said it wasn't his time yet. They said he still had work to do."